Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. No names. No introductions. Just truth. Let's begin, but I warn you, this doesn't unfold the way you think. She didn't see me walk in. That was her first mistake. The second? Assuming I wouldn't notice her hand on his chest, the same hand she used to trace lazy circles on my back while pretending we still had something left. The room was loud. Not with music, but with the kind of laughter that tries too hard. The kind you hear at parties where everyone's pretending they aren't miserable. I stood there, just past the hallway arch, holding a half-wilted bottle of wine I brought like a peace offering to a war I didn't know I'd already lost. She was wearing red. She never wore red. Said it made her feel too loud. That night, though, she wanted to be loud. And there he was, some guy with a jawline you could slice bread on, leaning in like they shared something sacred. Maybe they did. Maybe it was mine. They were pressed so close that air probably apologized for getting between them. And I didn't breathe. I didn't yell. I didn't storm across the room or demand answers in front of strangers who just keep sipping their drinks and watching the drama like some live theater production. No. I left the wine on a table, turned around, and walked out the way I came in. And I swear, not a single soul noticed. I drove home with the windows down, though the night air cut like knives. My phone buzzed twice. I didn't look. I knew what it would say. Where are you? Everything okay? Can we talk? The lies always came gift-wrapped in concern. By the time she came home, 2:41 a.m., I was already on the couch, still dressed, staring at the ceiling like it might offer me closure. She didn't speak. She didn't ask where I'd gone. She went straight to the bedroom. By 6 a.m., I heard it. The kind of crying that doesn't ask for comfort. The kind that bursts out when you realize the silence isn't a strategy, it's a verdict. And that's how it began. No screaming. No revenge. Just quiet. And a woman who finally realized what it felt like to be left without a word. She didn't ask me anything the next morning. Not a word. No fake good morning. No awkward apology. She just shuffled into the kitchen wearing one of my old sweatshirts like it still meant something, like she hadn't just shattered the meaning behind everything it represented. I was sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee I couldn't taste. My eyes followed her, but she avoided mine like they were landmines. I watched her fumble with the toaster like it required brain surgery. Her hands were trembling. She dropped the bread. Picked it up. Dropped it again. And still, not a single word. Just sniffles and sharp inhales like she was trying to hold herself together with invisible thread. She poured herself coffee, black. She hated it black. Said it made her feel like she was being punished. Maybe that's what she wanted. I didn't ask. What I did do was stand up, grab my keys, and walk out the front door without saying a thing. Her mouth opened just a little, like she might say something. But she didn't. I think she was more afraid of what I wouldn't say than what I would. I didn't go far. Just drove to the hardware store and stood in the paint aisle for an hour pretending I was choosing colors for a wall I hadn't even decided to keep. The silence between us had become thicker than drywall, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to patch it, or tear it all down. When I came back, she was gone. No note. No text. Just gone. The bedroom looked like a hurricane had passed through, drawers half open, her red dress from the night before in a crumpled pile near the closet, still smelling like his cologne and expensive wine. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, wondering what kind of person you have to be to wear something like that to an event with someone else while your husband waits on a sidewalk with a bottle of wine and hope. I sat down on the floor next to the dress. I didn't cry. Not yet. But my breathing was uneven and shallow, like my body couldn't decide whether to fight or collapse. The doorbell rang. I thought maybe it was her. Maybe she had come back to say something, anything. Maybe she realized the damage she'd done and wanted to own it, or apologize, or at least give me the decency of honesty. But it wasn't her. It was a package. Delivered early. Inside was a photo book I had ordered 2 weeks ago for our anniversary, one she'd completely forgotten. Page after page of smiles, vacations, lazy Sundays, movie nights, that stupid camping trip where I burned the marshmallows but she said they tasted better that way. Every photo was a memory she'd already replaced. I closed the book, tucked it under my arm, and walked it straight to the dumpster. As I turned to go back inside, I finally looked up at the sky. It was gray. Empty. Just like us. By the time evening rolled in, I still hadn't heard from her. Not a text. Not a call. The house stayed quiet, and that silence started to feel less like peace and more like pressure. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. We'd been drifting for a while, maybe longer than I was willing to admit. But there's something different about silence after betrayal. It echoes. It scrapes against every surface of your life like a slow, dull blade. I wandered through the house just to feel like I was moving. The hallway felt longer than usual, the kitchen colder, the framed photo of us at Lake Willoughby more mocking than sweet. Her laugh in that picture used to make me feel like I had done something right. Now, it just looked like a stranger who knew something I didn't. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a text. A photo notification from the cloud. One of those memory reminders. A cruel little pop-up from exactly 2 years ago, our weekend in Ashfield, where we stayed in that crooked Airbnb and spent hours playing card games under a leaking skylight. In the photo, she was holding a slice of pizza above her head like it was a trophy. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what happy looks like. I deleted it without hesitation. Then, almost instantly, regretted it. Like even the memories weren't safe anymore. That night, I opened her laptop. Not because I was trying to be nosy, I was already way past that. I opened it because I had to know if I was crazy. If the look in her eyes at that party really meant what I thought it did. It wasn't password protected, she'd never cared to lock me out. I used to think that meant she had nothing to hide. Now I wondered if she was just confident I'd never go looking. Emails. Dozens. None from the man at the party, at least not under his real name. But I found an account saved in autofill that didn't belong to her work. Personal, maybe. Or secret. I logged in. It worked. What I saw inside didn't punch me, it wore me down, slow and heavy. There weren't graphic messages. No photos. No explicit confessions. But there were threads of conversations with someone named C. Just the letter. Conversations that started months ago. The kind that begin friendly, then drift into the kind of emotional intimacy that makes physical cheating feel like a formality. Things like, you understand me better than he does, and I feel lighter when I'm around you. And then this one, dated 2 days before the party, I wish I didn't have to pretend anymore. I closed the laptop. Slowly. Deliberately. Like I was sealing a casket. I didn't sleep that night, either. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, wondering when exactly she had stopped loving me. Was it gradual? Was it all at once? Was I ever really enough? The front door opened around 3:12 a.m. She tried to move quietly, but I heard every footstep, every creak. I didn't get up. I didn't call out. I didn't even shift in the bed. Let her think I was asleep. Let her wonder what I knew. That was the first time I ever withheld the truth from her. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong at all. She waited until late morning to come into the room. I'd been sitting there, fully dressed, pretending to read emails I hadn't opened. I heard her hovering in the hallway, her bare feet pausing outside the door like she was waiting for permission that would never come. When she finally stepped in, she didn't say my name. She didn't even apologize. She started with, "I know what it looked like." That line, that pathetic, overused line, was the first thing she thought was worth saying after years together. I looked at her. Not with anger. Just exhaustion. That kind of deep, soul-sick weariness that makes your bones ache. "You don't know what it looked like," I said quietly. "You know exactly what it was." She froze, like she didn't expect me to push back. That's the thing about being quiet for too long, people mistake it for weakness. They forget it can turn into something much sharper. She said his name was Callan. So, see, had a name after all. She said it had, started emotionally, like that made it better somehow. Like I should be grateful she hadn't jumped into bed with him on the first night. She said she didn't plan for it to happen, but she also didn't try that hard to stop it. She said, "You and I stopped talking months ago." And I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was convenient. People always say, we stopped talking, when they've already started whispering to someone else. I asked her when it began. She hesitated. That told me everything. She said it started around the time I missed her office party because I had the flu. He drove me home, she said. It was nothing then. Of course it was nothing, until it wasn't. Until the texts turned into long walks. Until the walks turned into inside jokes. Until the jokes turned into, "You understand me better than my husband." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I asked her one question. "Did you love him?" She didn't answer right away. That silence. It was louder than anything else she said that morning. Eventually, she said, "I don't know. But I think she did." I think that was her way of softening the blow, for herself, not for me. Then she asked the thing I wasn't ready for. "Are you going to leave me?" My heart should have said yes. My pride screamed yes. But my mouth stayed shut. And in that silence, I saw the first flicker of fear in her eyes. Not regret, not remorse. Fear. Because for the first time, she wasn't in control. I told her I needed time. Not space. Not distance. Time. Because when you give someone space, they imagine you'll come back. When you ask for time, they start to realize they're not part of your plans anymore. She left the room quietly. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors. Just her, shrinking as she walked away. I finally let myself breathe. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened a blank document. No plan. No outline. I just started typing. And somehow, that was the first real conversation I'd had in months, even if it was only with myself. 3 days passed. We lived like shadows under the same roof, barely crossing paths. She cooked dinner and left it on the counter like a silent offering. I never touched it. I spent most of my time in the guest room, half scrolling through social media, half staring at the wall. I wasn't looking for closure anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just numb, like someone had turned down the volume of my life and I couldn't find the remote. Then came the message. Not from her. From someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Marin. The subject line simply read, "I think you deserve to know." It was one of those emails you hover over before clicking, your heartbeat louder than the clicking of your mouse. I opened it. And I swear, I didn't breathe once through the entire thing. Marin said she worked at the same firm as Laurel. They weren't close, but she'd noticed things, whispered conversations in hallways, too many late meetings that ended at upscale wine bars. And then, last week, she overheard Laurel and Callan in the stairwell. She didn't say it was cheating. She said it was worse. "He told her to stop leading you on," she wrote. "He said, if you're not going to leave him, stop making him think he has a chance." I read it 3 times. That last sentence echoed in my chest like a steel bell. Not only had she betrayed me, she'd been managing me. Keeping me close enough to feed her guilt, but never close enough to matter. I was a backup plan she never intended to use, a soft place to land if her fantasy crashed. I didn't respond to Marin, but I saved the message. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Because for the first time, I saw what I had really been to her, a placeholder. That night, I confronted Laurel. Not with yelling or accusations. I just asked her point blank, were you ever planning to leave him? Her face went pale. She stammered through half sentences, it wasn't like that, I didn't want to hurt you, it got complicated. But the truth was clear in the pauses between her words. She had made her decision a long time ago. She just didn't think I'd ever walk away. I told her about the email. She went quiet. Not defensive. Not angry. Just silent, like a child who got caught stealing and had no story left to tell. I asked her if she loved him. She nodded. And then I asked something I never thought I'd have the strength to say. Do you still want to be married to me? She didn't answer. That silence, her silence, was my answer. So I stood up. I took off my wedding ring, placed it gently on the table, and walked into the guest room without looking back. She didn't follow. I hadn't told anyone. Not a single soul. The whole thing had been rotting inside me like some secret disease I couldn't name. I wore it on my face, though, people noticed. The barista at the cafe started writing, "Hang in there," on my cup. My co-workers stopped asking how I was. Even the mailman started making awkward small talk like he was afraid I'd burst into tears if he handed me a package too quickly. Eventually, I broke. I called my older brother, Devin. We hadn't talked deeply in months, but he was the only person who knew me before I became this shell. We met up at a quiet bar on a rainy Tuesday. I hadn't even taken a sip of my drink before the words came spilling out, the party, the man, the silence, the crying, the emails, the ring on the table. I left nothing out. He didn't interrupt me once. He just stared at me, jaw clenched, like he was bracing himself for something. And when I finally finished, I waited for him to say what everyone says in these situations. She doesn't deserve you. You'll get through this. You should leave. But he didn't say any of that. He looked me dead in the eye and said, I knew something was going on. The air left my lungs. What do you mean you knew? He sighed and rubbed his forehead. It's not like I had proof. I saw them together once. A few months ago. I was getting coffee near her office, and I saw her with a guy. She didn't see me. They looked too familiar. I stared at him, stunned. And you didn't tell me? I wasn't sure, he said. And I figured. I don't know, maybe you were working through something. I didn't want to stir the pot if it was nothing. Nothing. That word, nothing, hit harder than anything Laurel had said. Because if even my own brother didn't think it was worth mentioning, then maybe I really had become invisible. A ghost of myself. Someone people pitied but didn't trust with the truth. I got up from the table, furious. Not at Devin, not completely. But at the world I had allowed to form around me, one where I was the last to know everything. My marriage. My friends. My family. They had all seen pieces of the wreckage and quietly turned their backs, hoping I wouldn't ask questions. As I walked out into the rain, Devin called after me, Monroe, I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. I turned, soaked and shaking, and said something I never thought I'd say. She already did. You just made sure I didn't see it coming. I drove around for hours after that. Didn't want to go home. Didn't want to be anywhere I recognized. I ended up parked outside a diner we used to go to when we were first married. We'd sit in the booth near the window and share pie at midnight like two teenagers pretending the world didn't exist. I stared at that booth for a long time. It was empty. Just like me. I came back home just after midnight. Not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else left to go. My phone had 3 unread messages from Laurel. I didn't open them. I just walked through the door, soaked from the rain, stepped over a pair of her shoes in the hallway, and collapsed onto the couch. I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs. That space wasn't mine anymore. That room hadn't felt like mine in months. Maybe longer. The next morning, I woke to the smell of something burning. For a second, I thought the house was on fire. Then I realized she was trying to cook. Something she hadn't done voluntarily in over a year. I walked into the kitchen and saw a pan of something unrecognizable on the stove and her standing there in one of my old t-shirts like it was supposed to mean something. "I made breakfast," she said, not meeting my eyes. I stared at the scorched mess and didn't say a word. She pulled out a chair, sat down, and finally looked up. Her face was pale, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept. "I've been thinking," she began, and I instantly felt the weight of another speech coming. But this time it was different. There was no justifying. No spin. No manipulation. She said she knew she had ruined us, that she had taken everything we built and gutted it with a smile. She said she didn't realize how much she'd come to depend on the idea that I'd always be there. That no matter how many cracks she carved into our foundation, I'd patch them up without asking questions. And then she said something I didn't expect. I ended it with him. She waited for a reaction. I gave her none. Not because I didn't care, but because it didn't change anything. She might have ended the affair, but the affair hadn't ended me. It had started something else. Something I couldn't unsee, unfeel, or undo. She slid an envelope across the table toward me. My name was written on it in ink. Inside were 2 things, her wedding ring, and a handwritten letter. I didn't open it. Not yet. "I'm going to stay at my sister's for a while," she said quietly. "You need space. And I need consequences." I watched her as she stood, grabbed a small duffel bag from behind the couch, and walked toward the door. She paused just before opening it, as if waiting for me to stop her, to say something, anything, that might imply there was still hope. I didn't. And then she was gone. For hours, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in my hand. The ring felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried all the weight she dropped on me, all the years, all the betrayals, all the empty apologies. Eventually, I opened the letter. Her handwriting was messy, like she wrote it through tears. It was a stream of guilt, a confession that she hadn't even understood herself when she started pulling away. That she missed the version of us that used to laugh in bed at midnight and sneak off to diners and take photos in broken photo booths. But she also admitted she hadn't been willing to do the work to get back there. She'd chosen the easy escape over the hard rebuild. And now, she didn't know if it was too late. I folded the letter, placed the ring on top, and walked it upstairs to what used to be our bedroom. I left it on her nightstand. That night, the house was quiet in a different way. Not empty. Not broken. Just waiting. It took me 2 weeks to decide. 2 weeks of sleeping alone, of reading that letter over and over until the ink felt burned into my vision. 2 weeks of visiting familiar places I hadn't been in years, the library where we met, the lake where we had our first real fight, the bench in front of her old apartment where I proposed in a snowstorm. I didn't go to remember her. I went to remember me. And somewhere between the silence and the old echoes, I found him again, the version of myself that wasn't broken, bitter, or begging to be seen. When she returned to the house that Sunday evening, she knocked before entering. That small gesture nearly undid me. It was the first time in a long time she treated me like someone who had a choice. We talked. Really talked. There were no raised voices. No dramatics. Just honesty. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her. She wasn't even sure she deserved it. But she did say something that finally felt real. I don't want to rebuild what we had. I want to build something better, if you're willing. I didn't give her an answer that night. I told her we'd have to start from zero. Counseling. Space. Rules. Complete transparency. She agreed to everything without flinching. That was new. 6 months later, we're not the same couple. And that's a good thing. We still have scars. I still get quiet when her phone buzzes unexpectedly. She still checks my eyes for resentment. But we're working. Not coasting. Not pretending. Not getting by. Working. She left her job. Voluntarily. Said it held too many ghosts. She started teaching art classes at a community center instead. Funny thing is, she's happier now than she ever was in corporate life. And I started writing again. Real writing. Not just therapy journal rants, but fiction, something I'd buried for years under routines and silent dinners. We're not perfect. We never were. But we're present. And that, maybe, is enough. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Have you ever experienced a turning point in a relationship, where everything fell apart, only to rebuild into something stronger? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you turned pain into something positive. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story spoke to you. You're watching Reddit Confessions.